Talofa, and welcome to the Ben TV. I'm really excited to have you with us today. My guest today is Cainne, who is the founder and organizer of Cubby Art Party. Normally I would read a bio, but today I'm going to let Cainne do the honors.
My name is Cainne. My pronouns are they, shim. And I am an agender trans person from so-called USA. And I'm here now making art and massaging bodies and doing a bit of study.
When you talk about community and we talk about activating space and people out there doing incredible things that with connecting people and creating spaces, this is one of my inspirations that I've just recently met, and I'm really excited about that. So now, one of the things that we wanted to have a chat about today was Cubby Art Party. Give us a little bit of background. What is Cubby Art Party? How did it start? Let everyone know how amazing it is, because it's super cool.
Cubby Art Party actually started as a birthday party. It was my 29th birthday, and I wanted to secretly have a birthday party, but I wanted to party. But I didn't want to party in sort of the sense of like getting wasted and going out to bars and things like that, because it's not really my style. Time and place, everything, you know? And I was living on the west side at the time in my own little like two-bedder, and I knew all these people from different realms of the arts. And I thought, I wonder what would happen if I turned my apartment into an art gallery and invited all my poet friends over and invited all my art friends over and, you know, asked them to mingle with each other and make art babies and used the excuse of my birthday to make it all happen. And we did, and it was fantastic. One of my friends, Paul, who was ran this gallery in Brunswick called Soma Gallery, unfortunately lost to the lockdowns, said, yeah, let's put it in the gallery. And then we did. And then later someone else said, oh, can you do one of these in my house? And we did. And then we took photos, and I said, oh, I'll apply for some grants. And those came through. Then when the lockdown hit, was able to curate a magazine since we weren't able to do the in-person parties. And that kind of launched us into a bit of a, I don't want to say a different direction, but maybe a more public-facing direction, where the parties were a bit more exclusive and just not necessarily exclusive, but more community-focused. Like, let's just have our friends together, and the centerpiece is art. And it's kind of spiraled from there.
No, I love that, and I love that, you know, there's the resilience in that. Like when lockdown happened, everyone had to sort of pivot and change, and how do we still keep the connection? How do we still keep community during lockdown? And I love the fact that you moved into the magazine. So tell us a little bit about that. What's in it? What do people expect in this magazine?
So it's sturdy like a book and bendy like a magazine. It's my favorite thing about it. And we printed within DigiPrint, which also makes me very excited as well.
What's a DigiPrint?
And DigiPrint is a First Nations run printing company.
Okay, shout out.
Yeah, I found out about them through More Than Melanin, which is also an incredible people of color publication. And yeah, just the community sort of spiraling and sharing resources. But in the magazine, we had artists from all over the world, as I'm flipping through it now, just sort of looking, submitting artwork. And sometimes I'd like run over to someone's house and take photos of their art, which was incredible because I love texture on a painting. And so sometimes I was sitting there with my camera like, you know, photographing this artwork and doing little interviews kind of like what we're doing, and type some stuff up and just use art grants to sort of push it through and get everybody some cash during this really tough period. Okay. And I thought it was nice to also have like a physical, almost like a time capsule of like this thing that we all sort of went through collectively. The art itself is not curated. Okay. It's, you know, they say, oh, what should I submit for Cubby? I say, submit whatever you like. Right. Say what you have to say. Right. And then my job is just to put it all in a cohesive order.
Right.
Right. So if somebody wants to talk about their experience as a trans person and somebody else wants to talk about their experience as an African person, and then maybe there's an African trans person, then I might put it in a
Right.
certain order throughout the magazine so that there's a
Yeah,
continuity,
I love
right,
that.
of content.
The contributors were from everywhere. You put it together and designed and did layout and everything. Yeah, how was
I
that?
did. Oh my gosh. So I spent a year of my life on it, which I don't regret at all. And fortunately was actually able to predict the time relatively well. I thought, I guess this will take me a year. And it did, which was good. Yeah, use some of the grant money to, get the computer, get the programs, get on YouTube, look at some tutorials. I was very blessed to not be struggling financially during the lockdown and not to be forced out of my home into these difficult situations that a lot of people were. And so I thought, okay, well, what can I do with this privilege that I have right now? And also, how can I develop my current skill set that will continue to help me in this sort of emerging living situation that we're all kind of going through on the other end of lockdowns, while the pandemic is still kind of raging on. And I thought publication was a great way to do that, which I just have to say, I noticed a lot of other collectives were doing publications as well. And I thought that was a really beautiful testament to the way that I guess we kind of all function on this sort of what do you call it? Subconscious level. Right. And some people just were strictly online magazines, like Dichotomy is an Afro magazine. They're like primarily online. More Than Melanin did a thing. Some sex worker collectives did a thing. It was really encouraging to see everybody really fighting hard in their corner to like uplift community.
Yeah. And it's almost like if I see someone else doing something cool that's going to inspire me in my group, like how can I do something similar? Or, oh, that's a great idea. Let's use our creative powers and forces together. And I'm going to like a little bit off topic, but I think when we're talking about all of these different publications that happen, these are good to submit to like the Australian Queer Archives and things like that, because it's almost like a capsule in time of what were we doing, what were people doing, like how were people behaving during lockdown, and what kind of art were people creating during this time, which for me is really awesome. And I love the fact that you mentioned they were all paid. Because this is thing around like exposure dollars, like, oh, we're gonna pay you with exposure. Like, have you ever had that? Have you ever gone through this?
Yes. So there's like layers in that answer.
Yes.
So Cubby did originally start with just like the labor of love, but it was all of us coming together to do this thing. And I had friendships with people who said, yes, we'd love to celebrate your birthday. But there was a rule of like, don't tell people who are coming that it's my birthday.
Right.
We're just having a party that we can all be together. And then of course I'm like, oh my God, it's Cainne's birthday. So that was that.
Yes.
And so in the beginning, it was very free. Like in terms of like people's labor, people, I wasn't getting paid. I was putting a lot of my own money into it. I still do.
Absolutely.
I still put my own money into it, which is fine. And as we were getting the funds, and this is actually an interesting sort of space where I'm at now, where we're the understanding how art grants work and this, that, and the next, and what finances of my own I can put into it without overextending myself, and then how to redistribute the finances that do come in as well from say magazine sales or ticket sales or something to make sure that all of the correct things are happening with that. It makes me kind of reframe my perspective on like power politics and finance politics. I feel usually it's larger organizations that will approach artists and performers and just people in general and say, we'll give you a gift voucher, you'll get exposure, this, that, and the next. And that's not really fantastic, when you have people are making multi-millions of dollars. In the beginning, sometimes I would say yes to doing things for free. And depending on the situation, sometimes I really regretted it and said, okay, I have to reframe this as a lesson and see what I can do going forward. And other times it was like, actually, no, this was rad. Like, I'm so glad that I did this. I'm so glad I said yes to this. And I do kind of, for me personally, try to pretty much only say yes to people of color and Afro people and First Nations people to do things without pay. But I love a Skillshare.
Yes.
Like I don't want to get too into it, but for sometimes I have asked the DJ to come on to this next event that we're doing. And they said, oh, well, I charge this much. I said, oh, I'm paying for my funds and I have this much, but also I'm a massage therapist. If you'd like an hour massage for free, I can put that on top because usually that costs this much. And then we're here doing some skill shares with like my friend who's a tattoo artist and things like that. So that's always a good thing. But then there's other times where things can be quite exploitative. There's a bit of a thing kind of happening in community where people of color and African people and First Nations people's images from other larger events. For example, I was in the audience at an event, and one day I woke up and people were sending me this image of myself that was being used for an advertisement campaign for an arts company that had never approached me personally at all, or my organization or anything. And I said, why are they using my image to promote this thing when they don't have lineups of African people, African trans people, African queer people? And it was like, well, it's because I'm a hot African babe and I was wearing bondage and that's trending right now. It's useful for them for the algorithm. And I think that's something that needs to be taken care of. Having said that, company dealt with it really well, but I think those kind of exposure politics are, I think, what's more concerning to me, where you have people with power who are benefiting off just the images of people. I've noticed this a lot in the arts realm, where maybe there's one Afro or First Nations person on a lineup, but their faith is being used for the advertisement. And in a sense, that feels like a false advertisement to me, because I'm not walking into a space and seeing a bunch of other Afro people. I'm seeing a smidgen of an Afro person in the corner.
It could actually be dangerous, especially like depending on what culture you're from, especially in queer spaces. There could be an outing. It's like,
absolutely,
you have no idea. It's like just because the default is, okay, well, it's a crowd, let's take a picture of a crowd. But what that means for someone in the crowd is a different meaning of what this corporate thing is looking at. And it's like, it could literally be a life or death moment for someone. And it's this thing that like we need to get better at doing and understanding that the one viewpoint from a corporate or even a community organization, they need to be a bit mindful, especially around communities of color and things like that. So
and consent generally, right?
Yeah.
We know consent. You kind of, they had actually emailed me and said, oh, well, you consented to sign when you bought the ticket that your picture could be taken. I was on the door. The organizer put me on the door. They texted me and said, come to this event. So I rocked up to the event. I didn't sign any tickets. I didn't sign any consent form. But even if I did, that's not the way consent works. Right? You can say yes, and then 5 minutes later you can say no. And I think the big organizations of power probably need to have a little bit of a look of that. Just because they took a photo of you 5 years ago doesn't mean they should be able to continue to use it all the time if somebody says, actually, maybe don't use this anymore. Especially because we don't know who's a trans egg.
Absolutely.
We don't know.
Absolutely.
People don't know sometimes.
No.
And it can be really hurtful to see an image of oneself in an existence that was made to stay safe.
It's a big call out, or just an encouragement really to anyone organizing events. Be mindful around that, because not all people that are interacting in these queer spaces have the same level of privileges or freedom or perceived freedom that people think is the default. Let's have a little bit of a chat around Debussy. I'm saying the title because I love saying it, but let's talk about Debussy. What's Debussy? Tell us what's this all about.
Debussy actually came from a moment where I was just like a few wines in, as you say. And I was just like, oh my God, if I was a DJ, I would be DJ Debussy. I don't know how to DJ. I would love to learn how to DJ in case anybody's like listening and want to teach me. There was a mentorship art grant program that ran, and I was one of the recipients. And as a part of that program, we were able to use one of the council spaces for an event. Okay, we're going to be in this space. It's in a church. And I haven't been in a church for like 20 years. And at first I was really struggling with it. Like, I don't want to go in there. And then I thought, okay, well, if we're going to go in there, maybe we can do something with this, right? And So I thought, all right, we'll make this event, we'll call it Debussy, and it will be a party to celebrate trans people, sex workers, and the people who respect them.
Yes.
Right? Not just the people who admire them or like lust after them or whatever the situation is. Respect, keyword. And I thought the title just really, Debussy, really suited that.
Yeah.
Because if you know, you know, that's all I'll say. And it's going to be typical Cubby fashion, running from, actually, it'll be a little bit shorter than previous ones.
Okay.
So as opposed from 12 to 12, we're going from 2 p.m. to 10 p.m.
The lineup is about nearly 20 performers or something like that. That's like a festival. Like.
Yeah. Just one day.
Yeah.
Just one day festival.
Yeah.
So we'll have a little bit of burlesque, a little bit of drag, a little bit of pole dance, a little bit of DJs. We'll have some art booths. There'll be, really beautiful candles, and the magazine will be on sale there. And we're going to have some international artists doing some projections and things like that. It's all still highly, very experimental. I haven't been in the building because of Fringe. It's been very busy.
Wow.
I go in on Monday to have a look at it.
Okay.
And then I set up on the 11th.
Tell us about who are some of the exciting people that you're looking forward to?
Okay. Well, we have Moxie Delight, who's an incredible drag and burlesque performer who I have not been able to witness in the flesh. I'm extremely excited to see her.
Moxie Delight?
Oh my gosh. And we've got Fish Cat Zombie from over in South Africa doing some projection work.
Wow.
We have the Obsidian Pole Collective, which is going to be debuting that evening. It's just a group of African pole dancers, some of which are sex workers, myself, and some of which are just pole dancers. Important distinction. And we'll be, just having a bit of a dance in between, sharing our joy time. Pole dance, big joy time for me. Motherfunk is going to be playing. DJ Nene is going to be playing. Miss Catalina is going to be playing. I'm so excited. It's going to be great. We also have Miss Evangeline, who is going to be doing some visual art. We have Rhoda, who will be doing poetry. She's phenomenal.
Oh, I can't wait.
Phenomenal poet. Okay. Those are just some. There's many more.
Now you mentioned a little bit about amazing poet and amazing poems, and that falls under the category of just creation and the whole creative process. You did some work around poetry as well, like you did some things. Tell us about your involvement. You're a spoken word poet.
I have to say, poetry for me has always been a huge coping skill. It's from my earliest childhood memories. Writing was a safe space for me to articulate things in a coded way that I could say what I needed to say and still be safe if that piece of work happened to be unearthed.
Right.
And there's more to that, but we can do that on a different day. And then throughout my teens, kind of just going to little spoken words at like Barnes and Noble or whatever the case may be that the little boarding school took us to. And then now as an adult, it was a way to find community. I was in Soma, the gallery I spoke about before, and I met a poet who was living there, and he said to me, "Oh, there's going to be a poetry night at Bar Usu, and I'm going to have a little dinner party before we go. We'll meet some other poets. It would be great if you came."
Right.
And oh my gosh, the poets that I met. That's the night that I met Tabani. That's the night that I met Jamali. And then we went over to Bar Usu, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is the thing I've been needing all this time. So I started getting up and doing some reading of my own poetry, which was still very much in that like coping skill energy for me. It was, which is, I think, totally fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was something that has always been for me, and then kind of turned into this like space to yell at white people and violent people and the people that sort of really upheld the colony and upheld rape culture and things like that. And then it became a space for me to sort of reflect and say, people started asking, well, Cainne, who's your audience? What are you trying to say? And I struggled a little bit, it's like, why are you telling me that this thing that's kept me alive, like this format, the words that I'm saying aren't good enough? Why should I be more flowery with my language? Why should I be more basic with my language? Why should this be written in any sort of format of poetry that's popular, like a limerick or something like that? And why did we forget the prose form, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And so I kind of took a step back and stopped performing my poetry because I wanted to review the function of it for me. Like, what was I doing with this? And this tool, right? And like something I was asking myself was like, when does a tool become a weapon? And what is a weapon really? Is it something that's used intentionally to harm somebody, or is it just like sometimes you might accidentally whack somebody over the head and that doesn't feel so great, you know? And what can I do to sort of like soften or create the impact that I want to? And do I want to do all of that? Do I want to move from a space of writing poetry strictly for myself, creating for myself, to creating for others? Do I want to care about the audience? Like, do I give a crap about the audience? I don't know. And that's actually where pole has come into my life, I think, where I thought to myself, is there a way to physically move my body to fill in the space to that the words in my poetry aren't quite getting across to people? Is there a way that I can deliver this content in a way that feels more digestible, that feels more, the word that's coming to me is enticing, right? How can I continue to captivate people? While also sort of being mindful of the psychological safety and well-being of that person. If that makes sense. Not to say that I'm entirely responsible for that, but I think sometimes holding somebody's hand through something that they might want to interact with. And so that's where I'm exploring now. Having said that, I do have a piece of work in the magazine, in the Cubby magazine called Unwoman, and it's only in the magazine. I don't perform it anywhere. And a piece called My Body, My Love, which is published in the More Than Melanin magazine.
Your interaction with spoken word, I think at the core of it, it's how am I connecting to people? How can I tell my story to connect to people? Whether it's through Cubby Art, whether it's through spoken word, whether it's through my performance, like it's a way of showing yourself, you know, like, and this beautiful thing around connecting with people. And I think when we look at the creative arts world and the people that inhabit these spaces, a lot of the times it's how can I connect? How can I show you who I am? And I love that because that's how I felt you just explaining around your spoken word. So thank you so much for that.
That's all.
People that are watching, we recorded this at a certain time. You might see it a bit later, so the timeline might be a little bit off. But what are some upcoming things for Cainne? I mean, Debussy is one of them. For us in this time right now, it's upcoming for us. What are some things that you're looking forward to?
Aside from Debussy, which is on November 12th, Hello to the Multiverse. We do a project called Spoken Word at Murmur Library. Murmur Library is inside Cainne's in Brunswick. And probably once a month, we do a poetry night with them. Murmur Library is a Black-owned library with all books by people of color, African and Indigenous people as well. And we just get community together and we go in there and it's open mic. One time we had someone come in and do stand-up comedy. Okay. And absolutely encouraging people to, you know, bring their guitars in and do, you know, whatever, expressing however they like. Someone told a story about themselves traveling, just like off the cuff, you know, just shared some reflections. And then, of course, lots of spoken word and poetry as well. Which you can find out about when those dates will be through our Instagram or our website. I'm sure they'll be in the links or something like that.
Absolutely.
And I think that's probably it for me for now. Oh, I will be speaking at the Trans Pride March on the 13th of November. But that's not to say come for me. That is to say just come out and support trans people because we really are everywhere. Whether you see us or not, you see us.
I think I'm a marshal on that day. So come and check out the marshals on that day because I'll be marshalling. I'll be with my bright yellow vest. My encouragement really is to the entire LGBTIQA+ community. We need to be standing with each other. Like, I mean, this whole division of, you know, between the different letters, it's so, it can be frustrating at times. especially when you see the discourse that sort of happens on social media, and it's like, come on, like we're one, like there's this saying around, you're only as strong as your weakest link type of thing, or your weakest team member or something like that. And I find that a lot. Like, how do you find yourself interacting in the general queer community here and now?
I mean, I'm hot, so I
Facts
find
are facts.
things, I find that things tend to come to me because of that. And I said it in a cheeky way, but I was speaking to somebody about this the other day. We were talking about disability activism, especially, and disability access within the queer community. And we were talking about how there's definitely a lot of capitalist mindset, especially around desire capital, keeping it sexy, keeping it hot. And there's sort of a focus on that. And so the primary participants of the queer community in the celebration of the queer community have a high, what I like to call a high assigned sexual face value, right? A high desire capital, a high currency of beauty, the concept of beauty and attraction. And so I find that can be actually quite alienating and difficult to navigate. This might not be the answer anybody wants to hear, but I do find that, and again, even as a sex worker, like as a person who works in erotic facilitation, I do find it a bit concerning how desire capital really has a really firm grasp on the queer community in NARM right now, where I find that when I have gone to a lot of queer events, somebody's always grabbing me. There's almost an assumption of hypersexuality. There's an assumption of we're here to, get it on with each other. It's like, we're here to meet each other.
Yes.
We're not necessarily here to do that. And all of the same rules still apply, right? And I think that's something that I say because of that, I've actually been not really in the scene, the events, right? Because I've been made uncomfortable by that.
Yes.
And but with that, I find the majority of the people I know are queer. The majority of the people I know are trans. The majority of the people that I know are in the sexy arts somewhere, even if they're not sex workers. So I have my community, like I'm really in it and I'm loving it. I feel like I'm thriving. It's fantastic. And the conversations that we have in community are fantastic. But I find in the watering hole spaces, in the spaces where we're meant to come together, meet each other, mingle, and try stuff out and see who there is to see, what there is to see, it's really kind of focused on like colorism, classism, futurism, and ableism, where all the hot thin light skins go to play. And and it's difficult. It's difficult. And like, I'm part of it too. You know what I mean? So it's like this thing that I'm constantly trying to check with Cubby. I'm looking at the lineup and I'm just like, what does this lineup look like?
Yes.
Who's represented in this lineup? And I was speaking to Ono from Deify, an amazing collective, which is now relocated to NARM, they asked me, they're so incredible. They messaged me and they said, hey, did you perhaps consider putting masks are mandatory for your event?
Okay.
Because there have been a lot of people who are in the disabled community, especially where it comes to like autoimmune diseases, who are not able to come out and have not been able to come out because of the risks, right? And we entered this really interesting discourse, right? Because accessibility it's not like this sort of like one stroke thing, right? There's all these different intersections in accessibility alone, where wearing a mask is helpful for one person with a disability. With another person, for example, like a lung disability or even maybe anxiety or something like that, totally not accessible at all. If you're wearing a mask and perhaps there's somebody who's hard of hearing or deaf and needs lip reading, then that access is taken away. While simultaneously, one of the things we got into was, there's going to be a lot of sex workers in this space. We're not going to out our sex workers. I'm face out, but that doesn't mean that all the other sex workers will be face out. We are in environments where we come into contact with lots of bodies. even though statistically we are we tend to have more quote unquote clean bills of health than the casual community.
I've heard,
That is more not to say about us, but the behavior of our clientele, right? The clientele that we see don't have the same level of care that we see, that we as sex workers have, right? And so by virtue of interacting, it can be a high risk situation because we, no matter how on top of it anybody is going to be for COVID, monkeypox, STIs, this, that, and the next, it's not possible to eliminate that. I am also a massage therapist. I'm also doing fitness instruction, personal training. So I work with bodies. I am an art worker, body worker, and sex worker. And that puts me in contact with lots of people. So we were talking about, well, I need to be transparent with this in saying that while I'm running around all day as the sole organizer of this event, I won't be able to wear a mask. I will need to speak to people. I'll need to as a person with asthma as well, need to be able to breathe. And I wouldn't want to just say, let's all wear masks, and then this is going to be safe for people who have immune systems that kind of disrupt their own lives for them. And so we were talking about, how do we make spaces where we can actually come together? How can we access each other in safe and mindful ways? And it's an ongoing conversation. We spiraled for hours.
But these need to happen, right? Like, that conversation that you've had, now a lot of people who are watching can have a think about that too. I've now thought about it a bit more, and I've learned something from that one conversation, because it almost feels like we need sort of strategies around that, because I'm sure there's a sweet spot somewhere, but like we're not going to get there without these conversations. And we need these people. We need people with disabilities to be speaking up and say, well, look, if I'm going to enter a space, I'm not going to leave it up to you to decide, but I've got a strategy to help out. So it's like, how do we bring the people to the table to speak? And sometimes giving people autonomy to be like, this works for me, and I understand myself and my body, but we need more people to be speaking. And so it's this whole thing around why people ask, when there's always this question around why is diversity important, and you're like,
isn't it just a given?
It's because of this sort of thing. And what I loved about what you said too is this word, and I love that, it's like, I have my community. So my version of queer community is the queer community. And so everyone's version of a queer community will look different for them. So I apologize when I said, how do you function in the queer community? Because I'm like, actually, what Cainne is talking about, it's true. I'm part of a queer community, but what that looks like is different to someone else's. And I'm really good to acknowledge that, because I don't want to get into that phase of being like, oh, do you mean normal? I'm like, oh, I just did a faux pas. Like, don't cancel me. God, I'm trying to learn here. You've been in Melbourne now for close to 10 years, and you're definitely you're local. What are some things that you think is encouraging about our communities that we are in?
Yeah, we really out here.
Yeah,
First of
I love
all.
that.
And all shapes, sizes, and just various existences, multiplicities. I feel like I just learned something new from people so often. And oh gosh, let's see. Well, there's the art, there's the performance. I really appreciate the way that the radical community functions, where people will call out injustices, but also work in their corners to really address the thing that they're calling out. And like, everybody's different and nobody's perfect and everybody's problematic, right? But I think that there's definitely this sort of like this blooming, right, where everybody's kind of popping up and blossoming and doing their thing, but also the fashion.
Yes.
I love the looks that people be putting together. Gosh, yeah, just people existing, even if I don't know them.
Thank you for being part of our show today on Ben TV. And from the bottom of my heart, would like to say thank you to Cainne for joining us today. And the links and information about Cubby Art Party and the magazine will be shared. And again, some of the events, come along and share a story with some of the upcoming events as well. We need more. We need to encourage people to come and engage because with engagement, it gives us more platforms to do more. And whether it encourages you to step out there and do something so you can exist, let's get together and do that. Thank you for coming to Ben TV Now.
Thank you.